Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to break down a staggering 10-year multinational intelligence operation that neutralized one of the most heavily protected figures on the planet, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in an event set in February 2026. Now, this isn't just your standard story about a military strike. It's a really profound look at modern intelligence, high-stakes geopolitical maneuvering, and the absolutely precise execution of what was known as Operation Rising Lion. Okay, let's dive right into this. Plunging right into the high stakes here, we first have to understand the sheer impossibility of this target. I mean, how do you track the most protected man in the world? For 36 years, Khamenei had successfully evaded literally every threat against him. He wasn't just a leader, he was a symbol, protected by these incredibly dense layers of human and technological shields that made him an absolute ghost to foreign adversaries. Penetrating this kind of security bubble didn't just require patience, it required a level of surveillance that we have rarely seen in modern history. To really grasp the scale of his security, just look at this number, 5. That is the number of minutes it took just to ride the elevator down into his primary underground bunker in Tehran. 5 whole minutes in an elevator? This wasn't some standard basement we're talking about. It was a massive subterranean fortress, deeply embedded beneath the city and built specifically to withstand heavy bunker buster munitions. You couldn't just drop a bomb. You had to know exactly where he was at the exact millisecond of an attack. So what actually sparked the plan to penetrate this fortress? Well, the catalyst actually began with a heist. Back in 2018, in a nondescript warehouse in the Shurabad district of Tehran, Mossad operatives literally used blowtorches to cut through iron safes, stealing about half a ton of secret nuclear documents and disks. It sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? But it was a spectacular physical breach, and it gave Israeli intelligence a very harsh reality check about the true, massive scope of the underground networks they were actually up against. That heist forced a massive strategic pivot. The intel they gathered revealed a tough truth. The old strategy of just playing whack-a-mole with nuclear facilities or targeting individual scientists, it just wasn't working anymore. The source documents note that as long as the core leadership remained intact, they would just rebuild the program somewhere else. So striking facilities was no longer enough. The new strategy became crystal clear: permanently dismantle the core leadership itself. But, you can't just act on that immediately without triggering an all-out war. They needed time, flawless intelligence, and serious international backing. To pull off this new objective, intelligence agencies spent years meticulously mapping the 30-acre Pasteur Street compound in Tehran, also known as the Matahari complex. This place was the absolute epicenter of power. It housed the Supreme Leader's residence, the President's office, and over 50 top government offices. For years, this specific 30-acre patch of land became the most intensely scrutinized real estate on the planet, monitored constantly by specialized groups like Israel's Unit 8200 and Unit 9900. And when you look closely at the compound, you realize it was essentially an impenetrable fortress built in 3 radiating layers. Think of it kind of like an onion. At the 500-meter outer mark, you had the elite Vali AMR guards, who reported exclusively to Khamenei, securing the perimeter. Moving into 350 meters, secondary elite forces, like the Rapid Reaction Unit, were stationed. And finally, the 3rd layer was the intense building-specific security, packed with rotating cameras, frequency detectors, and mobile jammers. But contrasting what was on the surface with what was underground reveals an entirely different battlefield. Below those 50 top government offices lay a sprawling 5-kilometer tunnel network. And here's the crazy part. This network featured 8 secret entry and exit gates cleverly disguised right in plain sight. We're talking gates opening near multi-story parking lots, children's football schools, vaccination centers, and even right beneath hospitals. This setup allowed VIPs to move around entirely undetected by overhead satellites. So that brings up the crucial question: how do you penetrate a fortress that is invisible from the sky and completely locked down on the ground? Well, they deployed a massive multinational intelligence web. And this wasn't all high-tech stuff. It actually started with ground-level human operatives. Agents infiltrated the absolute periphery of the inner circle, working as plumbers, electricians, and cleaners. They analyzed the compound's waste, they monitored food deliveries, and tracked the physical movements of the maintenance staff, all just to find the tiniest vulnerabilities in the armor. Then they paired that on-the-ground data with an overwhelming technological arsenal. They deployed Pegasus spyware directly onto the phones of guards, cooks, and doctors. A major breakthrough actually happened when Israel's Unit 8200 exploited a remote code execution bug in the compound's Chinese-made Tandy and Hikvision security cameras. From the sky, US KH-11 satellites were so unbelievably precise that they were calculating the heights of object shadows, while Orion satellites intercepted encrypted walkie-talkie chatter. All of this massive data was then securely beamed to a secret CIA facility down in Australia for processing. But here's the catch. Raw data is pretty much useless without context. And Iran even tried countering all the surveillance by using fiber optic cables that satellites just couldn't intercept. So to process the millions of micro-level data points they did have, intelligence agencies turned to Palantir's Project Maven AI to establish Khamenei's pattern of life. Think of this as creating a flawless digital twin of a human being's daily habits. The AI analyzed everything, from guard shift changes and backup convoy routes, all the way down to Khamenei's exact body posture and walking style. This ensured they could perfectly distinguish the real target from a body double. The sheer computing power used here is just staggering. To put it into perspective, the AI processed terabytes of accumulated surveillance data, lots of gigabytes of video, audio, and physical reports in just 90 minutes. And it achieved an astonishing 98.7% accuracy in predicting potential targets, convoy movements, and daily routines. The digital net was perfectly woven. They knew exactly where he was going to be, and exactly how he got there. Now, despite having this flawless intelligence blueprint, you can't just execute an assassination of this magnitude without the right political climate. The source material notes that during 2024, the Biden administration was actively restraining Israel from full-scale retaliatory strikes that might trigger a broader regional war. Because of this, Israel had to play a tense geopolitical waiting game. They were essentially waiting for a U.S. administration that would politically and militarily support direct, decisive action. The pieces finally started aligning in November 2024. Following the U.S. election, where Donald Trump won with heavy backing from pro-Israel donors, the groundwork was laid. By June 2025, Operation Rising Lion, a massive joint airstrike campaign, began testing the waters, though Khamenei survived that initial phase by hiding in a heavy bunker in Lavzan. Finally, in November 2025, sensing that time was quickly running out due to Iran's advancing nuclear enrichment, a definitive meeting between Israeli leadership and military heads fixed the assassination date for the first quarter of 2026. And that brings us to the climax of this decade-long operation, triggered on February 23, 2026. Human agents and digital intercepts finally confirmed what they called the Golden Intel. A massive, high-level meeting involving Khamenei and 40 top officials, including the defense minister and Quds force generals, was scheduled for February 28th. This was it. This was the moment. The entire core leadership was going to be in one place, at one time, right inside the Pasteur Street compound. But then came a massive twist of fate, or perhaps some incredibly deep espionage. Just 4 days later, on February 27th, intelligence confirmed the meeting was inexplicably shifted from the impenetrable underground bunker up to a surface-level building in the compound. Not only that, the timing was shifted from night to the morning. With this totally unprecedented vulnerability confirmed, final U.S. approval to eliminate the target was granted at exactly 3:38 p.m. Eastern Time on February 27th. With the target exposed, the execution was immediate. Let's look at how this played out minute by minute. The ticking clock starts at exactly 7:30 a.m. on February 28, 2026. F-35 and F-15 fighter jets launch from Israel's Navatim Air Base and other U.S. regional bases. By 7:50 a.m., they enter Iranian airspace, immediately jamming mobile networks all around the compound to completely cut off guard communications. And then, at exactly 9:40 a.m., the strike hits the target. But you might be wondering, how exactly did they get past all those air defenses? Well, before those jets could reach Tehran, Iran's highly formidable S-300 and Bavar 373 air defenses had to be systematically dismantled. They did this in a brilliant three-step process. First, supply chain malware, which had been embedded years prior by Unit 8200, was activated, instantly paralyzing radar screens. Second, U.S. Navy EA-18G crawler aircraft flooded the airspace with severe electromagnetic jamming. And finally, thousands of drones, which had been secretly smuggled into Iran over the years, were simultaneously activated to physically destroy the missile batteries right from the ground up. With the skies totally cleared, the execution was flawless. Exactly at 9:40 a.m., 30 Blue Sparrow hypersonic missiles bypassed the atmosphere and rained down on the pinpoint surface location of that meeting. The intelligence was so incredibly accurate that they hit the exact room. The Supreme Leader, his family members who were present, and the top 40 military officials were neutralized instantly. 10 years of meticulous planning culminated in a strike that lasted just seconds. The fallout was immediate and honestly surreal. Imagine just looking at your phone to check a daily prayer app only to see a push notification stating help has arrived, followed by a demand for your military to surrender. That is exactly what happened to millions of Iranians just 12 minutes after the strike. A highly popular religious app called B'day Sabah had been deeply compromised by the CIA and Mossad. It was a digital coup de grace that really highlighted the terrifying extent of their infiltration. Which leaves us with a massive, lingering geopolitical mystery to end on. Quds Force General Ismail Qani actually survived this attack by stepping away just prior, miraculously marking the 9th time he has survived such a targeted strike. So we have to ask, was moving the most important meeting in Iranian history to a highly vulnerable surface-level building just a fatal administrative error? Or was it the ultimate internal betrayal orchestrated by someone deep inside the regime? What do you think really happened in the shadows of the Past Streets compound?